Check, 1, 2.
Good afternoon. Today is March 3rd, 2026 is 2 p.m. and we're going to call the City Council study session to order. Could we get roll call?
Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff. Councilor Lawyer. Mayor Yazzie.
Here.
Councilor Cosa
Here.
and Councilor Gonzalez.
Present.
The next item on the agenda, reading of the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. Tom, could we have the recording, please?
This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The city of Durango is situated on the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi-Sinom, Hopi, and Diné Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step toward inclusion and reconciliation.
The next item on the agenda is the Public Art Master Plan.
We're just trying to figure out how to get it up. Okay, great. Yes, we're good now. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. We're so excited. I'm Catherine Wagner, Director of the Durango Creative District. Today with me, we also have Christopher Warren, who is the Vice President of the Durango Creative District. He was Chair of the Public Art Master Plan Writing Committee. So I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then he's going to go into a lot of the content that we really want to make sure counselors are aware of that is covered in this new document. Chris is a full-time professional artist who is very experienced with the nuances of public art calls across the country. So he is very well situated to give us some guidance for some potential new practices that the city could adopt. As a quick project overview, we worked on this public art master plan in 2025. It took us roughly 8 months to update this document. We began with an analysis of 20 other public art master plans from comparable communities around the country. Our previous public art map was composed in 2015, so before Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Fund was launched in 2022 and before a lot of huge increases of public art had happened. So we really felt that it was time to have a coordinated approach to how the city's public art platform is developing in a holistic way over the long term. We revised mapping documents. Previously, the public art map only included sculpture that was in the city's collection. This new version now has mapped 159 public art pieces through 11 volunteer scouting missions. We documented murals, sculptures, installations on both public and private property that were funded through various sources, whether it's Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Fund, Durango Creates, City's General Fund, or privately funded. So it's a much more nuanced document. We created a master KML database with geo-tracking and documentation data. All of this is now entered online for a living digital document that's available on the Public Art Archive. We collaborated with city departments, including the Prosperity Office, Community Development, Parks and Rec, and Multimodal, to talk to them about how they're approaching public art, what the Creative District can do for them to streamline processes. And it was a really great collaborative opportunity to work with the city and artists as well. Let's see, we've got our interactive digital platform, which is online. We'll be happy to share that. You can look that up. Public Art Archive is used by communities across the country. And this year in 2026, our main focus will be on developing engagement opportunities to complement this revised document, as well as identifying potential locations on both public and private property. The plan itself is divided into 6 parts: an executive summary and guiding principles, public art procedures and policy recommendations, best practices for public art processes related to the city's granting programs, proposed best practices for the City of Durango's public art procurement and maintenance, current public art inventory mapping, and a list view of current public art inventory. What's really exciting is this is very different than the previous iteration of the map, which is a very stagnant PDF that sort of just gets, shoved away. But this one is a living document. We're going to be updating it annually and also working with city staff in identifying potential CIP projects and infrastructure projects so we can have a much more forward approach to integrating public art, whether that's from the funding or planning process from the very beginning. I'm going to now pass this presentation on to Chris Warren, who's going to discuss identified areas for growth, proposed solutions to modernize Durango's public art program and processes, and how the Creative District is uniquely qualified to implement potential changes to the city's policies related to public art. Thank you so much.
Hello, counselors. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to point out some identified areas for growth that we found during the process of creating the public art master plan. And all of these areas of growth aim to do 3 things simultaneously. They all aim to streamline the city's public art procurement process, including reducing workload for staff and allowing for public input. They aim to grow the city's public art collection in an intentional and curatorial manner, and they aim to update the city's public art procurement process to match industry standards to ensure that the city gets the best applicants possible for public art projects. Can I go backward? Okay, yeah. Initially, one of the first things we pointed out was a method to streamline and kind of holistically approach the way that the city tackles public art calls, specifically in regards to CIP projects. Currently, the process is a little slapdash. Some money's left over at the end of a project, and then public art is approached in that manner. What we're proposing is creating a holistic approach to viewing each year as a public art unit, basically identifying possible CIP projects within different city departments in late spring, early summer during the budget building process. And then in December, meeting with those different city entities to make sure that the budgets that were actually passed by council match with what we want to do. And then at the beginning of each year, creating a public art calendar and process for the next year. Next. I also have lots of proposals for modernizing Durango's public art process, both including the calls and the budgets and the contracts. Currently, again, as I discussed, the calls for art happen somewhat sporadically when CIP projects come up and have available funds for public art. I believe that if the city were to adopt a standardized best practices and timeline for when to release calls for public art, what those calls should look like regardless of city department. So a call looks similar coming from parks, coming from community development, coming from transportation. It looks the same across the board. And then the same requirements within those calls. Currently, a call can have a different requirement for applicants coming from one department than the other. I believe if we were to streamline and put these all together in an effective, clear manner, that would go a long way in bringing in more artists to apply for public art calls in Durango and having better outcomes in public art. And the last major suggestion regards the art procurement process. Currently, the city operates under a full reimbursement model in the same way that a public works call might happen. This is not the industry standard in the state or in the country. Most public art calls involve a very clear contract between the city and artists that involves some amount of money up front to start the art project, clear benchmarks agreed upon between the artist and the city, and those specific outcomes, what they look like, and then, a payment at the end. Oftentimes that looks like a third of the money up front, a third of the money in the middle, a third upon completion, or half up front, half after the project has been completed. This is the standard across municipalities in our state and across the country. Grand Junction, Denver, Boulder, Montrose, Colorado Springs, they all operate under this framework. These are definitely changes from how the city currently operates public calls for services, and that is understood. If the city were interested in adopting a model like this, however, we would get a increased pool of artists applying to the public art calls in Durango. We would get a higher caliber of artists if we were to move towards seeking artists from beyond just Durango, beyond just the Four Corners. If we wanted to get a national arts call, this is a standard for any call of that scale across the country and across the world. And it will help keep artists in Durango. Currently, the only organizations that are able to put forth the material costs for a large scale art project without getting paid are going to be the same 5 groups that keep applying to Durango Arts Calls. We want diversity both within our community and outside of our community. I believe this is going to be an important step to discuss changing. For all 3 of these proposed changes, I believe the DCD, the Durango Creative District, is uniquely qualified and situated to implement all of these potential changes. Through the writing of the Public Art Master Plan, the Creative District staff and board have reached out to city departments and started these conversations and relationships, both in how public art can benefit the different departments and how the DCD can help reduce workload, frankly, for the different city departments, how we can kind of run point man and interference for projects that aren't very feasible but are going straight to parks, for example, how we can say, no, that's not a project that's fully baked yet. Please develop XYZ farther, and then we can discuss bringing this to an actual city department. In regards to standardizing the public art calls, DCD staff and board members, including myself and Catherine, have decades of experience both in applying to public art calls and crafting public art calls, and know the industry standards for the timelines, the elements required in those calls, the reasonable expectation on what to ask an artist before they apply, before they do the unpaid work, frankly, of applying to a public art call, with the hope that they get employment. And finally, in regards to the contracting and reimbursement section, we have extensive connections with creative districts and arts nonprofits and arts entities around the state. And if it is decided to explore different contracting and reimbursement processes, the DCD can reach out to these existing networks that we have to find out what works, what doesn't work. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can find out exactly how to do this quickly, efficiently, with as few of stumbles possible. Yeah. That is my section. I welcome any questions y'all have regarding these potential changes.
So thanks so much for the presentation. So I'm just going to ask some basic questions because I think I need a little reminder. Can you explain to me how we do it now and what you're proposing?
With which specific section?
Specifically the funding.
So the contracting, the way it works now, it is entirely reimbursed to the artist. An itemized reimbursement is required for the artist to receive any payment for public art projects. So that would include the bike racks at the pickleball courts. That was a project fully upfront funded by the artists who did that. And once it was completed, they submitted an itemized budget and were reimbursed only for those specific items. The way that most municipalities and private and nonprofit businesses work in the country, there is an award amount for an art project. It is $30,000 to create an art installation or activation in this space. You get part of the money up front. Maybe it's half, maybe it's a third. Maybe it's broken down by specific benchmarks, by like signing the contract, submitting files for architectural approval, blah, blah, blah. You get paid up front to start the work. You sometimes get paid in the middle to, meet a benchmark. And then you always get paid at the end, the final amount. It is rarely itemized. It is usually an award amount. And it is even more rare that a public art project funded by a municipality is complete reimbursement.
And then let me asking regarding the submittal process. So you mentioned that there was only about 5 or 6 entities that regularly submit, and that's because of the reimbursement, or is it?
I would suggest it's highly because of the reimbursement. And I think some folks that are applying to public art calls don't even know that it's a full reimbursement until a later step in the process. And then that's a bit of a shock to them. There are some elements within the way we submit the public art calls that I think are limiting our engagement. Those include like internet public portals that, it's a website called publicartist.org, for example. You can list, myself as a working artist, I go there, troll through, see what matches my skills. I apply through that. That's somewhere we can get our calls to a wider reach. Past city calls also required, or at least it's stated, that additional insurance, which is required to do the job itself, the call stated that additional insurance was needed simply to apply to the call. I believe we've moved away from that. We've moved away from that with the Chapman Hill call, thankfully. But that kind of back and forth, I think if we were to standardize public art calls across the board between different departments, say, here's the framework, then we'll send it out. I think that'll get rid of that, let's say, insurance issue. But yes, I believe the fact that it is a full reimbursement model is very limiting.
And then I have two questions. So another question I have, do we have any policies for diversity? You mentioned there was not too much diversity. Is there any, do we have a way to encourage just minority organizations, or perhaps, from participating?
None that I'm aware of in city processes. The mechanism I'm most aware of as a working artist full-time is a statement in the call saying we encourage people from BIPOC, LGBT, underserved communities to apply to this call. I'm not sure what it looks like behind the curtain in those cities or entities, what actual diversity guidelines they're using, but as far as the public facing aspect, that's usually a section in the call. And then that would also come down to whatever entity, be it the creative district or a city department, how they're getting the word out for the call. If they're reaching out to, hubs of underserved communities or not, that would be another element to at least reach out and try to achieve diversity that way. But as far as I'm aware, nothing on the city side right now.
Okay, and then very basically, I'm sure this is something I should know, but I don't. How do we fund public art?
A diversity of different financial resources. There's the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant, which people would apply their project individually to a public art call, or not a public art call. They would say, I want to build this sculpture. I want to do it along the river trail. And then they would potentially use dollars from the public art or the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant. Additionally, different CIP projects have had money left over at the end. I believe that was how the public art happened for the sewage treatment plant. And that, again, it was like, wow, we have these extra funds. We need to execute this project before December 1st, for budgetary reasons. And I believe if we did that first step, that holistic look, trying to plan out a whole year's projects at a time, would prevent us from getting our back against that wall specifically. But as far as I'm aware, Lodgers tax grants and CIP dollars.
One final question. This is just for visual art, right? Not performances or.
We would love to be creating calls for performance art, cooking classes, all these different things. It seems like the best way to do that is through the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant at this moment, just because it's easier to go to MANA and say, hey, put together a proposal to do an Indigenous cooking class that's free to the public and then apply for a grant. That's kind of a good avenue. As far as CIP projects, I don't think the city's process and public art collection is quite in the place to be exploring those artistic expressions at this moment. This is mostly in regards to visual arts.
Chris, thanks for the presentation. I think the Durango Creative District is a great example of public and private partnerships really working well together. You guys were intimately involved in the artwork going into the airport, if I remember right, correct?
Yep.
So I love the concept that we got the Ignacio High School welding team to do one of those. We've gotten regional artists that I think could apply, and I know more artwork's on the way for that. So really do appreciate the model, and I do think many of the RFP process changes that you're recommending make a lot of sense to me. If you're in this town long enough, enough starving artists that they can't afford to put the money out on the front side of it. And I could give you 3 or 4 names off the top of my head. That's been a problem, right? right standing in front of me. So I do hope that we'll take a look at this and just see what we can do to make that improvement. I have a couple of questions just in regards to the master plan itself. And so first one is really artwork that is also kind of commercial signage. Old Timers Cafe, the FLC biking program garage door. How do they get determined whether that's signage for the business or whether it's artwork?
I think in relation to the Old Timers one, it's because it's historic artwork.
Okay.
Those kind of got grandfathered in because it is a heritage mural. As far as the FLC garage door, I'm not positive on that one, but the city has a design review board, and any new murals going up have to go through that committee, and they can't include advertising or lewd language or any stuff like that. So that's the process to prevent those from moving forward as paid by the city public art.
And so like Mac Liquors that does their own, but it's got clear advertisement of Mac Liquors, though it's a nice mural on there as well. Does that ever get considered as art, or it's always commercial ad?
So the Mac Liquors logo was already existing, and it was very specifically tooled that what's coming out of the taps is not what is being sold by the business. It is Columbine flowers, and
Okay.
it was a separation of that and of that level, and that was okayed and gone through that city design review committee.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great education on that. Talk a little bit about maintenance. I think it's important that council understands not only what's the creation and adding of new art, but how do we maintenance and who's in charge of maintenance for existing art?
Yeah, so currently through the Prosperity Office, a public art archivist is hired every year as a contractor to go through, catalog the city's public art collection, and take notes about what needs upkeep, what needs adjusting, how to keep the public art collection vibrant and sustained. With the program that Catherine Wagner brought up, the Public Art Archive, that is a free online feature that we're using right now. If the city wanted to invest in a yearly subscription addition to the Public Art Archive, we could then create a whole backlog or a back end of all those notes from this paid contractor by the city, what public art projects need amending, touching up, whatever, what specifics that can all live in one document that then any city department could access, could then, prioritize what needs fixing, when and how. If the city wanted to invest in that additional subscription, that would greatly improve the ability by any department in the city to not just locate what needs fixing, but then to log what they have fixed or what they've contracted out to fix. So through the work we did last year, we are now set up to really help maintain all these pieces and keep them looking as good as possible for as long as possible.
Maybe one for the city manager. Do we have a maintenance budget within the Prosperity Department that outlines what we're spending on maintenance of artwork? Sorry, Tommy. And that will grow as the number of works of art grows. Makes sense, right? Okay. Okay.
It waxes and it wanes year to year, depending on the maintenance report.
Budgets.
How on top of that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. One last question. I didn't see a lot about removing art that's been damaged too far, that's just not working at deaccession, I think deaccession, something like along those lines. So there is part of the master plan will include how do we remove stuff that's beat up or has expired?
I think that'll come from the contract work of, reviewing existing
Maintenance.
the maintenance
Okay.
contract work to say this is
Time to
this is
go.
on its last legs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not currently in the public art master plan we wrote, but as Catherine said, it is a living document. So if those things get flagged, we can mark that in the public art master plan. And if something gets removed, we can take it out of the public art master plan. So people aren't looking for a lost object.
But there's not necessarily a time limit on some of the art that's out there that we would want to replace and put in more visible locations, nor is there necessarily rotation, right? We want to move these things around. So
No, the closest we had, I think, was the city poured like concrete plinths for artworks, but those are all full and those are permanent placements at this point. So
great.
as far as rotation, I'm not aware.
Thanks for the presentation. Love the document. It was enjoyable to see some organization around what has been a little bit of a piecemeal work from in the past. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. It was a good presentation. I have one question and then I have one comment. Okay, so when they do the murals, do you put an acrylic sealer on there after it's done, or is that just you rely upon the acrylic paint that they put on the wall?
There's usually a seal either to help with UV damage, but since it's usually outdoor paint, that's not an issue. But there's always applied anti-graffiti shield, and that comes in two different forms. One option is it makes graffiti easier to clean off. Another option is it makes like a layer between the artwork and graffiti, and then you use a different solvent that removes all of that at once, and you put that up again.
Okay, thank you. And then my comment is I've really enjoyed looking at the artwork on the buildings as I've driven down different areas of downtown and so forth. So thank you very much for all your effort. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one final question. We would, as the creative district, we would love to draft a possible option of what that yearly plan I mentioned could look like and what that timeline could look like. Additionally, draft a public art call framework and timeline, and draft a contract and payment schedule, and then present those to council. If we were to do that, would you like us to discuss those changes with city departments before bringing that to council, or bring it to council during an actual meeting so a vote can happen, and then go to different departments after that?
Jose?
Yeah, that's not something they're going to be able to answer because it's a study session. They can't give direction at this
Okay.
council meeting. So you're kind of asking for that and they're
Great.
just not going to be able to through
Totally
protocol.
cool. Yeah.
Just if you wouldn't mind, you can work through Tommy and Mike. And if there's a request to council, they can send it to the council for you
Perfect.
and place it on the appropriate venue.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is sustainability grants and planning update.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Marty Poole, the city's sustainability manager. Here to give an update on some grants, programs, both grants that the city has received recently and are working through those projects, and then also a couple sustainability related grant programs that are being issued out to the community. Could have been on that slide while I was doing. Okay, so starting with the city issued grants coming out of the sustainability office, we have the Durango Impact and Resiliency Grant. So we were, this was previously Visit Durango had the Destination Advancement Grant when they were a separate entity, and the city had the Green Durango Grant. When Visit Durango combined into the city, we recognized the overlap in those grant programs, and we combine them into a single impact and resiliency grant. This is to fund projects that support the destination management master plan and the consumption waste section specifically of Durango's sustainability plan. The scope of the projects and some of the work is dictated by the funding availability because this is coming from two different budgets, but that is done on the back end. That's not something that the grantees have to concern themselves about. They just come up with a project and propose it, and it can be evaluated by the review working group. The next is a level 1 EV charging grant for employers. So for those of you that may not be familiar, level 1 EV charging is just an outlet. It's just a good old fashioned electrical socket. And cars come with portable cords, basically allows your cord to plug into that outlet the same as you would plug in your phone. It's not particularly high power or fast charging. You can usually add about 3 to 4 miles of range per hour that you are plugged in. But if you're plugged in all day at work, that can add about 30 miles of range. That's, if you think about it, that's a gallon of gas. Costs the business about $1 of electricity. And so why are we concerned with this? Well, it's a great way to address EV access equity for people that don't have charging at home. It provides employers an incentive to have employees transition to EV charging. It also importantly incentivizes daytime charging use, which is really important for taking advantage of our solar production. A lot of regions, as you know, are getting to this point where the solar production during the day is essentially hitting 100% or even maxing out above 100% of the consumption that a community is using. And so if you don't have a place for that electricity to go, that solar power is essentially just wasted. If you are charging at night, a lot of times, especially in our community, you are relying on natural gas fired electricity, sometimes coal or other sources. So incentivizing places for that electrical energy, that PV, solar photovoltaic energy to go during the day is really important. And this is a low cost way to achieve that. And who wouldn't want to go to work every day and get a gallon of gasoline for free, essentially, or for $1? So those are the grants that we are issuing as the city. Now transitioning to grants that we have received. A lot of these are, if not all actually, are technical assistance or consultation grants in one form or another. And there is a lot of planning work that we have ahead of ourselves as the city for sustainability work. So first and foremost is we received $58,000 from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, CWCB. Side note, get ready for some long names and lots of acronyms, but So this allows us to update our drought management plan, which is from 2020 or 2021, and then our water efficiency plan, which is actually quite a bit older than that. And there's a lot of overlap and some redundancy, and some of the material is hard to sift through in those two plans. So we are combining them, and we're really taking a focused look on, we will have one section specific to water conservation, long-term water conservation and management of our water resources. The other aspect will be a very direct and easy to use drought response plan for acute drought conditions. And I know that is on everyone's mind here heading into this summer. Knock on wood for a wet spring, but if we have updates even before the final version is solidified, we can bring those to the city manager and then potentially to council for kind of an interim consideration. But that will be going ongoing work this summer. It also feeds really well into our water system master plan work that will be kicking off either later this year or next year. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, Technical Assistance Grant. So this is to help the city and LPA, also with some support from FORCOR, to look at best practices for outreach to multi-point family residential sites, specifically for electrification and energy efficiency. These sites often have what's known as the split incentive, where renters are paying utility bills in one way or another, or they are using the energy in the building, but the responsibility for upgrading those facilities and investing in those facilities, installing new equipment is on some property owner. Sometimes in our case, in our community, those property owners aren't even local. It may be, a company that is out of state and just contracting with property management. It's across the board. Or it may just be one person that owns a property and they're just down the street and we could call them on the phone, no problem, So the outreach to all these facilities looks really different. By getting this best practice guidance and some inventory work on these, it can really help LPA and the city reach out on these projects, but can also inform best practices for other outreach to these types of properties where there is this kind of split in engagement between the property owner and the tenants. Transportation Sustainability Office, we are looking at the Clean Transit Enterprise, the CTE Technical Assistance Grant, and this was awarded, right? Sarah? Oh, not. So, what? Oh, Sarah. Anyway, 90% sure this is awarded. When she walks back in, we'll, hey. Has the CTE been awarded? Cool. Yes, thank you. So this is, as you know, we adopted our zero emissions vehicle transition plan for our transit fleet in 2023. And there's a lot of work ahead of us for that capital investment and equipment transition, both in the buses themselves, but the infrastructure for charging them. And it's new and it's somewhat complex. And so this grant helps with developing the technical specs for the procurement docs for us to align with our goals outlined in the ZEV plan, but had to have those that specific information so that we can make informed purchasing bids. Strategic Technical Expertise for the Public Sector, the STEPS grant program. This was awarded towards the end of last year in response to the resolution that council passed in early 2025, directing the city manager and staff to investigate organic waste management ordinance options for our community. There's a whole slew of ways that communities manage organic waste through what is required by code or what's just opt-in but incentivized. We have ordinances that manage ordinances that dictate how we can manage trash and single stream recycling in our community. And this investigates the different options and the pros and cons of different organic waste management ordinances and makes some recommendations. So that research is ongoing. It's just about $80,000 of free technical assistance that we are receiving, and we'll be giving some updates in the coming months to council. So far, we have the consulting agency RRS and EcoCycle have completed stakeholder interviews. They've opened, we have an open focus group application that's currently open. We're just trying to get a few more applicants there, and we'll have some focus groups, and then there will be a community survey, and then all that information will be summarized. Last but not least, we have the extended producer responsibility. So this is EPR. This is not grant funding. This is an entirely new system set up for the entire state of Colorado, passed by legislation a couple years ago, and has the plan has been in development for a few years, but it is now ready to roll out here in Colorado. And basically what it does is any company that creates traditional recyclable materials, so think boxes, bags, bottles, things like that, cans, aluminum cans, any company that makes those has to pay a small fee per unit produced. That fee goes into a statewide fund for recycling, and then private entities or municipalities can access those fund dollars to fund their recycling programs. And so potentially that could offset the need for our residents to pay recycling fees, either in part or in whole, which has certainly helped reduce people's bills. Now, I have to point out a caveat there. If we have not been able to look into the information of what can and can't be funded, what the timeline for that the reimbursement is. There's a lot of details for how we can engage, potentially engage in this program, and we don't have all the answers yet. And so, you know, I definitely cannot stand here right now and say, you know, next month people's recycling bills are going to go away or going to be cut in half. It's some misalignment that, you know, dictates how we can or can't engage in this program. But it is an important statewide program that is certainly on our radar that we're investigating. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you, Marty. So I just, regarding, I know you say you don't have all the information, but this extended producer responsibility fund. So can you explain that? I mean, practically speaking, what does that mean?
So the concept of extended producer responsibility, just as an idea, is the fact that if you have a private entity, someone that is producing an item, a widget, something that is going to create waste or pollution in our environment, that you charge the producer for the ultimate management and disposal of that item. So a common example is like lead acid batteries. You have to put down a deposit because those have big environmental consequences. So the people that make the batteries or sell the batteries, you have to put down a deposit, they pay into a system, and then they pay into the statewide management of recycling lead acid batteries. So this is now being extended to traditional recycling.
And so then the battery, you would take it somewhere, or you would take it back to the place you got it?
Yeah.
And they would take it from there?
Yeah, it's illegal to throw away lead acid batteries. You have to take them to a place to dispose of those batteries. And so anytime you buy a battery, they collect a fee. And then anytime you take it back, you either get a refund deposit or they just pay into the system. It kind of depends state to state. So.
And so what about large, like, I don't know, like who makes, for example, sorry, I'm blanking, like shampoos and
like plastic bottles?
But yeah, large.
Yeah.
I mean, why that, for example, is that part of this system?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So this system, so extended producer responsibility systems can cover a wide range of materials. This one and this state legislation specifically is like, think your classic blue bin recycling. So plastic bottles, aluminum cans, soup cans, boxes, paper. Any company that makes a unit of that material has to pay a fraction of a cent per, aluminum can that they make, has to pay into a state fund, and then that fund gets distributed for to fund recycling programs throughout the state. The reason being is when a company brings an aluminum can into this world, there's an argument to be made that they have responsibility to see that can through in its life cycle. And if they don't pay into a system, it's on the consumers or the municipalities to fund the waste management for that thing that they introduced into our community. And so now they are helping fund the recycling system.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a long time coming.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been on my mind for a long time because as a consumer, really what options are there when you buy shampoo or dishwashing liquid or
Yep.
washing detergent? I mean, what option do you have but to buy what's available?
Right.
So I've wondered why that has taken so long.
Yeah, we are one of the first states in the nation to do something this comprehensive. So it's pretty excited being on the cutting edge.
And so then just regarding, do we have community partners regarding, for other of the recycling systems, restaurants and hotels, and do they have their own system or?
We could get you more details in a follow-up email, but in short, the city provides trash and recycling service to all residential accounts, and residential accounts have to take part in the city system. Commercial accounts, the city does provide trash and recycle services to those accounts, but it's of their choice if they want to contract with us. The other service providers in our area are Phoenix Recycling, their local Waste Management, and Republic services. So those are all private collection entities. A business can subscribe to their service if they want, and then those entities manage their waste streams as they see fit. For us, our trash, the transfer station, which then goes to Bonded landfill, our recycling goes to the recycle center, gets packaged up, and then gets shipped to a waste management facility in Denver.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Marty, really quick, is there much conversation from between Waste Management Republic, our recycling services, and Phoenix in regards to the impacts that may happen from this ERP funding?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually don't coordinate on it. Specifically this the structure of this program is specifically tailored so that it doesn't necessarily require that coordination. There's a lot of sensitivity around private, the rights of private collections agencies to run their businesses. And so any entity, the state is the intermediary. So the city of Durango is in discussion, reviewing contract options with the state. Every single one of those private haulers is reviewing contracts with the state. A big recycling center would review. And so there's a lot of like boilerplate contracts, but then each one of those could ask for changes or pieces that they aren't taking part in. So no, we specifically don't coordinate amongst each other because that would kind of be some interesting sort of market issues there, right?
Like violations of.
Well, no, but I mean, if you think about it, waste management is technically especially commercial, is a free market. So there's entities that provide services and people can subscribe to whoever they want to. So we, couldn't engage in some kind of like, price negotiation amongst ourselves and then go to the state. It's individual. So.
And yet it does seem to me that Cortez has very similar issues with managing their recycling that Durango would, that, the municipalities in general are dealing with the same rural location, lots of trucking, what is happening to these materials once they hit waste management in Louisiana or wherever they're going to. I mean, those are some similar issues. So it's unfortunate, I think, that we're not talking about some of the similar circumstances that all of us are in. That's not your department. I'm not trying to put you on the line there. So anyway, thanks. I look forward to this extended producer responsibility funding. I think this is really important and hopefully can be a game changer for us.
Yeah. We, again, no guarantees about what is or isn't coming your way. We have not had a chance to dive into it yet. Very much at a high level, but once we have some of those specifics, we'll be working with the city manager to review our options and bringing those to you for your consideration. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Marty. I have one question about this extended producer responsibility. Okay, so since it's going to be a state-funded run program, the state is going to put a fee on all these plastics boxes that get shipped into Colorado. So the management's going to be on them. And then
That-
how do we get the funding from that?
Yeah, that's correct. So any company that ships those materials into our state, or companies that, like, if you have a, like, Coors makes cans, they would get charged. The state, then, the way that the municipalities or the private entities access the funds is we enter into a contract with the state. So the state collects all that money, they have a fund. Then we enter into a contract with the state to say, this is the scope of our services, this is how much it costs. And then there are certain things that the legislation or the fund is allowed to pay for. There are certain things that it isn't. And then when we come to that agreement, we basically, instead of billing our residents for the trash and recycle, we bill the state.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Marty.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is a current technology update with Bryce Current and Randy Black.
Current technology, no pun intended.
Bryce, we're not seeing a presentation for you.
You have the presentation, Bryce?
Yeah, it's been submitted.
Mayor, maybe just take a quick 5-minute recess and then to give them some chance.
All right, let's take a little break while they set it up. Thank you.
Basically, very quickly, you guys help me with promotion. Yeah, do business, yeah, but it's done more center pestering by it's just considered. Yeah, I still have to go. Yeah, that is a trainers. They get see that direction of the side too. Yeah. One is process of, getting from. You put all your resolution. They do just say, it's one about you. Yeah. 3 a day. Cool. Yeah. Don't do it. Good. Good. Okay, cool. Off. You should, so you can step back. Yeah. You killed it, huh? I'd love to see that. Great technology presentation. Sure. Technology doesn't see that. Sure. Like, I didn't know if this was your way of like backing out or kind of where you're going, but either way, good.
Oh, wait. I'm running out of opportunities. Okay, Bryce, could you continue?
All right, thank you, Mayor. Like doing a presentation on technology when the technology's not there. So it's always fun. Hello, council and everybody online. My name is Bryce Current. I'm the Chief of Police. I'm going to be presenting today with Fire Chief Randy Black. And he has me on a timer right now. So I tried to save a little bit of time. And it is in the docket. I saw the article. Hopefully you're able to see that. And also I may skip a video here if we run long. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. And so this is a technology update as we continue to balance privacy and safety within our community. First, I'm going to focus on our vision and our mission. Everything should go back to that and our strategic planning. We work in partnership with the community as one, with One Durango. Community members are really the real first responders within our community. And we get information sometimes third hand, and it's somebody's perception. And then it's 911 operators' perception of that person's perception. And then that information is relayed to the officers. So we're always working hard to looking for ways to make that relay better, faster, and more informational based and reality behind that. So we all know that change is inevitable and progress is optional. And we're all about progress here within Durango with our Trail to Excellence. We're a progressive agency from the beginning. We've been transparent about our commitment to advancing technology while balancing privacy. This presentation is an update where we currently stand using technology. We have been going throughout the community, speaking to different community groups, and it's a little broader presentation than this one. This one's a little reduced, and we've had positive feedback from the community. We appreciate the opportunity to provide this update and highlight the efforts we have discussed and are now coming to fruition here pretty soon. But we're also cautious. We're a cautious agency and we watch other agencies constantly and their technology they're using and how they're progressing. It's also necessary to know not only the Fourth Amendment, but also the intent behind the Fourth Amendment to be free from search and seizures, not just as people, but specific places. In using technology, we feel it's important to understand the past, shape the present, and also impact the future. So we have a responsible innovation framework, one, to protect life, to champion transparency, to reduce danger, and most of all, to amplify humanity. The people consent to be policed in a community, and that consent is based on trust. Trust is earned, it's not borrowed, and rent's due every day. The community needs to trust that we're prioritizing preventing crime and also protecting privacy. So this is a rundown of our current and future technology. First thing I'm going to mention, this is not all of our technology, obviously. We've had since laptop computers and all the different systems that we input into. We have lots of technology, but some of the newer technology that we have now is, I'm going to start with the AI Draft One transcription. Some people call it report writing, but it's more of a transcription-based AI. And Axon with our body cameras, it's the same group that has this technology. It's really great in many ways, but some of the reasons I like it the most is it's trained our officers to talk to their cameras about how they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're thinking, which generally only came out in court. And it makes a more robust platform on reporting. It can also take 5 different people or more and separate them into different voices and identify those individuals and their statements. And so the information in the reports now are what the people are saying and not the perception of what the officer heard in their reports, which is great. We're seeing some we haven't moved to using this technology with felony cases or some of the more important cases, but the majority of our cases are being used by this, and it's also a big time saver. We're always looking for efficiencies, and this is proving to be a very good software. We also have the technology for live view in our body cameras, and here's our body camera right here, and it can be viewed by 911. And also our supervisors, and can increase safety. Knowledge is power. Real-time knowledge helps us make decisions. There's also the ability to translate into 50 different languages in this camera with a push of a button. We don't have that turned on yet, and we have some grants upcoming. It's part of a package, and we could implement that shortly. I will discuss flock safety and LPR cameras in the next slide. I know we've talked a long time about speed cameras. Things take a long time, but we're finally getting close on that within the next few months. And obviously we're going to follow state law of letting folks know and the signage before and after and the things we've discussed previously. We have an AI learning live policy question and answer ability that we could also include on scene. There's some really neat stuff coming out with that. We have two grant-funded AI softwares that we're currently turning on. One that I'm very excited about is Trulio, and it's an internal software, and it's like having several professional standards detectives within your department. So currently we do not view all of our videos. There's certain flagged videos that we view, and we evaluate certain items that within our department, like use of force, citizen complaints, internal complaints, firearms discharge, forced entry, pursuit, things like that are investigated, and those videos are watched. But just your everyday random video, you saw the article in the Herald, there's hours and hours of it. Well, this system can filter through that and learn our policy and our procedures and look for ways that we can become better. And video that we may need to view. It can also capture good things that the officers are doing great and ratify behavior and continue on the culture that we have and the one-on-one policing that we aspire to. And then Peregrine. Peregrine is a very similar software, but looks more at crime trends. And the best way I can explain that is to maybe use an example. Farmington and all our surrounding areas use it. Not all of them, but a lot of them. That's why we went with that instead of one called Force Metrics. But they had an incident in Farmington where a person moved in as a juvenile from LA and introduced himself to multiple friends, and they went around town. There were a lot of shootings. There was an incident where somebody had a firearm in their mouth and they saw a bunny tattoo on the individual's hand. And they heard him called Mondo, and that's all they had. And this software is able to search more robust than we are currently, and it's our own data, our videos, our reporting, jail conversations, multiple different things that we're unable to search now. This software helps us search that, and they were able to just type those 2 words in, and they had 3 individuals. Mind you, that's the start of the investigation, not the end. Just like constitutional policing has been like forever. It is it's the start, not the finish, or not the probable cause. So moving on, as promised, flock safety. ALPR is not a First Amendment issue, as the courts have found over and over, and as recently as January 26th by a federal judge, that there's no expectation of privacy in public, especially on the exterior of vehicles and displayed license plates. So the DAs of Colorado unanimously agreed on and opposed Senate Bill 70. And that's significant because in Colorado, every DA has to agree for them to oppose a bill. And if you think about the many walks of life, all of those DAs, especially in states that are progressive as ours, coming together on something is significant. The Boulder DA that's running for AG, Michael Doherty, that was down here speaking and answered a lot of questions, stated when he was down here, he's a proponent of flock, but he's also a proponent of keeping out of the hands of ICE. And he had a real common sense approach, which I appreciated, and I think we do too. There's a new acknowledgement form you can see on the slide, which I'm very proud of because I think that came from us. Everybody in the US that uses the software has to acknowledge that every single time they come on a lot, and that came from a lot of questions that you as a council had, and a lot of tough conversations with flock safety. And they also require now a specific reason for the search, which can be tied back to an audit. Previously, the system allowed different reasons that were vague, like investigation or stolen car, or even a number, if a number meant something to an agency that doesn't mean anything to us. And now it requires a specific offense type that is a universal language and a reason. And our reason is a case number also. And we can go back and audit all of that. Flock agreed also to let us in the middle of our contract to rework it, and the language was pretty clear in there, but to make it even more clear, and we worked with Mark and our attorneys, and also that the data is solely ours, that it clearly stated that within our contract. So the success of this program is very narrow in terms of offenses, and in a sense provides more privacy, and is not limited to it's not like a broad net, as you may have even read in the paper on the statement or the testimony that I had. In the past, we may have pulled over, like that incident that happened at South City Market. It was a white SUV. We had a blurry camera pick up a white SUV that had some kind of a mark on it. That's all we had. And it crushed the individual as it backed into him. In the past, we may have pulled over several white SUVs as they were leaving town, and we did not pull over even the white SUV because we went to their house. And so it's also necessary to know, let's see, that we could have up to like 3 million captured images of cars, 2 million this month, or on public highways, and only a fraction of those are viewed. So within every 30 days, those are deleted and never viewed again unless it's saved as evidence. So an average of 99.94% of anything captured will never be viewed by Durango PD. It's not surveillance. Surveillance may tell us where a car has been, but not where it currently is or where it's going. And the Jones case has been cited by folks, and that's with a tracker, and that's completely different. Flock is not the end of an investigation. It's the beginning. It's the breadcrumbs of the start of the investigation. It's not probable cause. It doesn't determine guilt. And if you look at this incident down here, we captured a blurry video of a car. It left. We captured, using that, captured a partial plate using Flock, then captured a full plate and a direction of travel, and that's it. So now they're either in Mancos or Cortez, looked up the plate information, saw that they lived in Cortez, called the officers down there. They had information on them. We had to go interview them before we could get a warrant. And then we got a search warrant, and all of that before we can get an arrest warrant. That's how constitutional policing works. The Senate bill that's out right now, that I have faith it's not going to pass, is complete opposite of constitutional policing. It wants the warrant at the beginning instead of the end. So it is, and the time limit on it, when I was on my way over here, the officers were looking at the Flock camera and called a guy in a different part of the state because he had just ripped a bumper off a couple that was on their honeymoon here. And he said, yeah, I've had guilt about this all day, and I've been wanting to fix this. And so, well, it'd be a good idea if you did, and turn it into his insurance. It's the information that still requires a judicial review and will be dismissed if the information was not gathered lawfully. We have an obligation to prevent violent crime, like the guy who drove through our town that committed 2 murders in Arizona, or Amber Alerts, or the guy who came in town to kidnap a college student, or the sexual predator. There was a teacher that had 37 victims. And I'll definitely be open to questions at the end of the presentation on that slide for sure. So now we're going to focus on the newest technology. The remainder of this presentation will be about the drone as a first responder program, which you've heard about. By providing real-time information before officers arrive on scene, DFR, not Durango Fire, drone as a first responder, transforms uncertainty into situational awareness, enabling more uniform decision-making, improved coordination, and safer, more strategic response planning. So faster response times, our response times are between 6 and 8 minutes, and this response time is less than a minute. Especially because of the river and the traffic and everything else, it's built perfect for Durango with a 2-mile radius. So safer outcomes, slow down cop cars. That's the number, well, de-escalation is the #1 thing, but slowing down the cop cars. I mean, sometimes the most dangerous thing happening in this biking, walking community, we always talk about speed, is our cop cars responding. And if we could have somebody tell them to slow down, that's what we need. And information is power, awareness is power to slow down. Privacy is protected by not patrolling, but responding to calls and returning straight back. Public-facing dashboards, logs, flight logs establish transparency. So what the community wants, they want safety, they want consistency, they want accountability, and they want privacy. What policing needs, we need faster eyes on scene, credible information, better decisions, and more de-escalation options. I have a lot of examples where this would really have helped us here in Durango that I can answer during questions if you want. But one of the best examples is from another city, and something I've seen over and over in my career is a suicidal subject in a backyard that had a gun in his hand. It generally ends bad because of a lack of information. And the drone information went to the team when the individual's hand got tired and he laid the gun down about 6 or 7 feet from him and sat against the wall. So, you know, because when you're sitting in an open area, you want to lean against something. And they offered that information to the team, which jumped the wall, which we would never do because it's going to put your safety in jeopardy and the person's, the victim's safety in jeopardy if you don't have that information. So how it works, the 911 call comes in, the drone launches within 10 seconds. The drone arrives with the first live video. The officer responds with better information, and the drone returns and logs the flight. Every flight is logged, published, and public facing. This data is important for the public and our strategic plan, which is constantly being updated so that we can measure stats, KPIs, and measure the effectiveness of all these programs. So this is what a flight log may look like, public facing. And I don't know the time in which it can be updated. I've seen from some agencies, they can have it up after 24 hours of what all the previous flights were and logged and what they and can go back to specific case numbers. Yes, public facing dashboard. And that's another thing that Peregrine and one of those softwares I mentioned is going to be able to help us with too. But so what it is and what it isn't. So what it is it's dispatch to important calls, live video to officers, 911 and staff, and fire and anybody else that needs it. So 35 to 40 minute flight times backed up by another drone while charging the battery with a 2-mile radius. So we can have it up 24/7 if we need, if we have a serious event. What it's not random or continuous surveillance. It's not a replacement for officers. It's not flown without legal authority, policy limits, and oversight. And it's not used to replace investigations. So, and I do have time to play this. So we've been watching Chula Vista, California since 2018. We've been watching a lot of agencies. We actually went up and visited Lakewood and some others in the Front Range that have been running this program for a while, and we are in communication with a lot that are actually standing it up right now. But she was the pioneer of this, and so I'll just play this news video. I see somebody's hand already helping me out. Thank you, Tom. Or do you want me to? There it goes. Thanks for watching that with us. A little bit of a recap, these next 2 slides before I hand it over to the chief. So what are the public safety benefits? Faster response to calls, as we heard, better situational awareness before arrival, which is key to the next point I'm going to make to de-escalation. Safer approaches and coordinated responses. I think sometimes the best thing that could happen is an officer not arrive at all. Sometimes we are the biggest escalation that can occur, and to have that information before is priceless. Better outcomes for victims, bystanders, and officers. And so the core value here is de-escalation. I like to tie everything back to core values. Early information reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is the enemy of calm decision making. If you think about those people walking up to that taco shop and the way they walked up, poor guy got arrested anyway. But you know, the response, and if you watched all these YouTube videos of these officers showing up and you're like, man, slow your roll. What are you doing? It's because you have the information, you're watching the video, and they're showing up cold. Better information upstream leads to safer information downstream. So I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Randy, and then we'll be open for questions.
All right. Mayor, City Council, appreciate the opportunity to support this program and talk a little bit about the fire department's use and where we would be able to employ this program. Some of the call types specific that we've looked at where this would be very helpful for the fire department specifically, and some of the challenges that we constantly have are when we get somebody in the river that flips their boat. You figure, say, take Smelter Rapid, by the time somebody flips their boat, somebody's calling 911, they're moving the whole time. And then dispatch has to answer the phone, and then they're creating the call, and then they're paging us out. And by the time we get paged, we have no idea where that person is anymore. And we end up deploying multiple stations on all the bridges trying to find and figure out where we should go. So we end up using more resources than are necessary to solve a specific call. So this is one where the drone would be able to go up. You can pinpoint the person, float down, give accurate information, and we can just make sure we've got the most appropriate crew responding to handle that. Wildfire is another location. The majority of the fires that we've had in the last 10 years have all come in as smoke reports, including the Twin Buttes fire that we've had most recently, where it came in as a smoke report and we weren't sure exactly where it was and what it was. Sometimes it's dust, sometimes it's heavy equipment. The fact that this was a fire, but it was over the hill and it wasn't visible, was very challenging for us. It actually created some financial challenges weeks down the road because where the fire actually originated was never pinpointed correctly. They thought it was on public land. It ended up being private land. And so there ended up in the cost share agreement. There were some challenges later on down the road even. But this would be able to get up and find these and give us an accurate size up, tell us whether it's a fire or not, the direction the fire is growing, how fast it's growing, and basically what's happening with that fire. And one of the amazing things that we found with this system, and you saw it a little bit in the Chula Vista video, is as a user, so for our battalion chiefs, myself, the deputy chief, we can actually toggle on our screen into the infrared version or not. So if there's smoke where dispatch might be looking for a location or access, I, as a different user, can look and say, wow, we've got a big heat signature. This is actually growing in a heat source and we're running, we've got a head of fire going. This is a different event. We need to change our resource loading. So for us, it's about getting to incidences quicker and making sure that we have the correct resources. From a structure fire perspective, when we look at some of the downtown fires that we've had historically, the bigger fires, Getting there ahead of time, telling us when we've got rescue considerations. We've had somebody that jumped to a neighboring roof on one of the fires that we had downtown. It would give us that information. Again, being able to be there, watch that, give us that almost immediate size up with the heat components with it, are amazing pieces of information to help us make sure that we've got the right resources, that we're going to the right place, and that we're attacking the fires correctly. And then also, as you saw in the fire or the video that was playing out of Castle Rock, those no address calls are always challenging in our community, just as you saw in the Chula Vista where they gave the wrong information where the car crash was. We have people on a river trail that don't know exactly where they are or which direction. We've got people from out of town. We've got biking trails. We've got a number of areas around here where people don't know their exact address. And for us, trying to figure out the fastest access point, when we can isolate and identify that location, it makes a huge difference for us. So our participation in this program is the site location. So the 2 drone pods are actually going to be on the new fire station down here, Station 2, at the former River City Hall site, supporting logistics in the program, supporting the community support for this program, coming out and doing some of the presentations. And then we're also evaluating the system for potential expansion at other fire stations. As Bryce said, this has a 2-mile radius. So from a call volume standpoint, Station 2 is our highest call volume area. But when we look at fire areas or reach or other challenges, when we're looking at some of our other stations, we could actually expand that coverage, as you heard again in the Chula Vista, where they've got multiple ones strategically placed, just as we do with our stations. It really makes sense to continue to add to this system and continue to provide community service with the program. And just from a little data standpoint, structure fires and current materials are doubling in size. Once it's a well-developed fire, they're doubling every 30 to 60 seconds. When we can get appropriate, accurate information, make sure if it's in an alley, if the alley is the better access versus the front of the street, that puts us in a complete different location, different approach. So making sure that we can correctly get there. The early size ups helping the incoming crews, again, making sure from a resource standpoint, location that we're being in the right place. And again, from the wildfire perspective, just really getting an accurate picture, resource loading, knowing if we need to order air resources, getting helicopters, getting planes, whether they're seats or large air tankers. If we've got something growing on a red flag day or something significant, accurate information for us is absolutely critical for us to be able to make those decisions and request those resources and get them there in a timely fashion. That is the end of my piece. Just back up.
Thank you. Well, that was really fascinating. So and I think that Chief mentioned that it was just a 2-mile radius for the drones. So how many do we currently have and where are they?
So we're going to start with 2, and they're going to be on the fire station right across the street here. And the 30 to 45 minute flight time and to be able to switch. And originally we thought, and they said this is what a lot of police departments think, the vendors, that we would put one out at 3 Springs and put one here, and that way we could have one up. And so, but then we did a resource allocation study and found out that over 95% of our calls were within this 2-mile radius right here. And they said, you're definitely going to want 2 up right there with the 30 to 45 minute battery span to be able to one land and charge while the other one can go and take its space. Yes. No, within that. Within the
95% of all calls.
Yeah.
Shazam. All right.
And so,
and of course I'm getting that from a vendor that did the study. but yeah, but it was enough to let me know that the optimal decision would be what other police departments have done. And I talked to all these other chiefs that have done the 2 drone system instead of spreading them out.
And how much are they?
So that's a great question. And the reason it's a great question is because we think it was outside of our affordability until we were able to get on a contract with somebody. We're looking at $350,000 a year to stand up a program like this. And so we thought it was beyond our reach, even though we had watched it since 2018 or 19. You know, that's where it really just became out of our reach. But Axon and the Skydio group, and we're also looking at the group that's going to continue to evolve. There's several different companies that have them faster, will stay up longer and different things, but where the most departments have partnered with this group and they're going to continue to transition, they also allow us to pay on a yearly basis with a contract, and it got down to $112,000 a year, which to us is the price of a person that doesn't go on FMLA or light duty and is up 24/7.
And so I have some technical questions about it, but let me, hopefully you'll.
And I may not know those. but
Well,
fire
I mean,
away.
just technical in terms of, so there's a 911 call that comes in, and then is there a person who's monitoring it?
Great question. And we figured we'd start getting a lot of these today. So one of the great things that we're doing, a lot of other departments are hiring, 5 to 7 people, and we're actually doing the opposite. And working with 911, and Katie, and how efficient she is. We feel like we can do this with the internal personnel that we have. And it may or may not be a police officer, but the majority of the time it's going to be a 911 dispatcher that's trained, and the drones are able to fly. We went into Lakewood and other places and watched them actually fly the drones, and they're able to fly it with a mouse. It's GPS coordinated. There's only been 3 in the history of time that have went down. So there's policies and procedures as to where you fly next to a crowd. And there's safety precautions that people have learned, but they also have a parachute. So it would be, at this time, we're planning on flying out of the dispatch center. And so it'll be pretty incredible because there she is. 911 dispatch will be able to have our cameras on live view. Normally they 10-4 check us every so often to make sure we're okay. They have no clue what's going on. So they're going to have that data. They're going to be able to talk to the other officers, and they're also going to be able to have the information from above at their fingertips.
So I have some questions about Flock, but I do just want to give this example of in my hometown, there was a young man who was on the spectrum. He was nonverbal, and he ran away. They couldn't find him because he also he was hiding, and they found him with a drone fairly quickly, and he was safe. But anyway, because he wouldn't speak, he couldn't tell anybody he was lost or anything. So anyway.
But one of the examples I was going to use that I didn't earlier is the individual with dementia that left, and we searched everywhere for him and we couldn't find him, and we knew he was close. He had to be. He was in a yard, went down next to a fence and laid down, and we found him the next day, and he was almost deceased, and this would have been perfect for that.
And so let me just get back to the Flock, because that was really one of the questions. Because we know that we've heard a lot from our community about the uses of it and how they've been tracking people, and there's been reports nationwide about Flock being used for things that perhaps they were not designed for. Maybe it was designed for that, but the problem is the third-party system, as I understand it, that's tracking things that it shouldn't. So let me just ask you one specific question so I don't forget. In the event that we decide we don't want to use them, is it simply turning them off? Can that be done? And, if as a community we decided we didn't want them, could it be so simple as an on-off button? And is that the same for your cameras, your body cams? Because I remember when the body cams, first came out, it was by municipality could decide how they wanted to use the cameras. And by now it's been many years since we've had the camera technology. And so I wondered about how, as a community, do we have the ability to decide that we just want to turn off cameras or on cameras?
Most of our contracts and legals, very good about this, have a clause in there with if council does not approve the budget or the process for that technology, that we can cancel the contract. Won't be renewed. I think any technology can just be turned off. There's legal implications. If we turn off our cameras, it's obviously going to be violating state law. So there's other issues. But I want to go back to the statement you had, and I know it wasn't a question, is more of a statement, but you used the word tracking, and I heard that word multiple times throughout the Senate bill hearing as well. And that is not what this system does. It doesn't track. It doesn't know where people are going. It doesn't know where they are currently. It just can search, like this incident we had across the street just now about the bumper being pulled off that happened 10 days ago, and they had to use other avenues to try to figure out who that was. Then they were able to get enough information to try to find it on the Flock system 10 days later, and they were able to see where that vehicle was. If it was a tracking software, they would have known that he was back home.
Okay, I'll turn it over. I have a few more questions, but I'll thank you.
Yeah, a smart guy said debates about the use of technology often hinge less on what it does than on what people fear it might become. So that's out of your article, I think. So so I think that's a very real fear, and certainly something that I've got on my mind a lot. Since we're on the topic of Flock, I'd like to just talk about that and then move back over to the drones as well. So the Flock data retention and some of the key things that are being asked of at least limitations on what we're doing with the data. Do you have standard responses that you feel or you're saying to the same comments over and over and over again? As we get them, in interactions with the public, it does feel like we don't necessarily have the same talking points. I'm learning stuff every time you've provided some information for sure, but there's questions on limiting the data retention to 48 hours, judicial warrants to access Flock data unless there's exigent circumstances, those kind of things. The question really before you is just, do you want to keep having these kind of questions thrown at you randomly, or what do we do to try and get a little bit more organized around the bullet points that we would be talking to the public about?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because I don't know the inside of each individual city manager, not city manager, but city councilor. I do know. And so it's hard to know what talking points that we're all going to use. Okay. We know what ours are. And, with the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police, we feel that 30 days is a good measure because we still lose a lot of data. We still don't solve cases that could have been solved, but we balance that privacy. I think when 99.5% of the photos are never viewed and they're deleted after 30 days, we don't even have to do that by state standards in Colorado. If we had LPZ cameras at intersections that captured wrecks, like a lot of cities do, you'd want to put a retention maybe of, 7 days or something on that, because a wreck, you'd be able to probably solve it within 7 days of somebody's work week. And those are the things we think about. This last one took 10 days. Some take more.
I think if it's okay, I'll work through the city manager, but I may pull up the common 5-6 questions that we're getting and just see if there's something in response from you, because I want to make sure that we're sticking to the same conversation. In regards to the drones, then I've got a couple of questions related to those. We talk about no random surveillance, but we're delineating that Snowdown Parade and parking the drone over the Snowdown Parade is not random surveillance. Is that correct? We have been using drones, I think, during large events and for protection, and I get that, but I'm looking for the line between random surveillance and planned surveillance.
That's a good question, because and the thing about that drone, and it's not my favorite drone because it's loud, it doesn't go very high, but it's stationary and people are moving. It's not tracking people and it's not going with people, and I think that would be the critical concept. And I think every community should be very firm on knowing what the policies and procedures and that they match the values of that community in that community. And because I do think there are some people that probably stretched it and used the drones for random patrol. Random patrol is not surveillance. It's probably not going to be against the Fourth Amendment, but it scratches too close. And we know that we may solve some crime that way, but it's not worth it. The squeeze isn't worth the juice. It's not the values of what this community would want. But we've had all positive communication with knowing that the drone could go straight to a call provide good information for the officers, especially to de-escalate an event and save lives, and come straight back. And not get outside those boundaries. And I think that's how we protect, which I think that article encompassed quite a bit too, is to protect those civil liberties also.
Right, right. The budget conversation that we just had, a couple of questions occurred to me. So you're at 112,000 per year. Is that only whatever the math is on that 55,000 to the city, and then 55,000 would be coming out of fire, or is that?
So fire or anybody else isn't paying anything. This is our project.
It's all, it would all be out of us.
Correct, but we
Okay.
want to draw others in. I mean, even streets, water, everybody uses it in these other cities. And yeah, I'll come knocking on their door eventually, maybe, asking for a little bit. But for right now, this is worth it for us.
Okay.
And we've been looking at this for a long time.
Sure, please.
We actually just signed the contract today, the access agreement to be able to, I think these are getting installed, the power's being run next week to make this happen. But part of the issue with this as well is the data responsibility and ownership. And right now it's all, the city has all the ownership, city rules. So when you start expanding funding, you start saying, okay, now who owns what data, who's managing it, who's storing it, and it gets pretty complicated. So from a starting jump off point, I think having that all consolidated and having that in a very concise, particularly with the concerns the community has about the data, where it's going, who's got access, is right now keeping that smaller rather than larger with that footprint is going to be easier to document, to show the value of this moving forward.
And then one more question for you, Chief Black. The drones that La Plata Search and Rescues is using, there's no overlap here. There's no way that we get some cost savings because we're able to help each other out. Their drones have to go way the heck further than 2 miles, obviously. So
yeah, and each drone system, it's like the city, they've got a tethered drone, so it will launch from a vehicle and just sit. That's a different type of drone. These are launched, and I believe even under different criteria, because a lot of drones have to be
Line of sight.
line of sight. So as the pilot, I have to be able to see where I'm sending that drone. This is under a different criteria. We sat right outside the PD, launched this drone and flew it down to the fire station and basically had it sitting on the deck where the dock was going to be. So this drone program has,
Before our conversation was over, mind you.
it took like 30 seconds. I mean, it was amazing. The guy was like, where do you want this to go? And we told him, and it was there. And we just sat there looking at each other like, that's amazing. I mean, it was one of the things even in the, the study we had recently on us, is that the river, as fantastic as it is for this community, is a huge obstacle for access.
thanks. I'll throw it back. Councilor Gonzalez, did you have more?
Shared funding. So I think that's important because it seems like you would use it you might use it often for the same. But I guess what comes to regarding the shared cost, what the 911 operators, is a shared cost, right? Because isn't the labor from the 911 also shared? Does that work? Because I imagine you're going to have specialty people. I don't know. It seems like you need people with special skills.
Yes, for 911, we provide the service. The employees are ours. It's our department. But that cost gets shared out through all the client services agencies based on their call volume, rolling average of 3 years.
Yeah, and while we're going to be working on that also, we have, people that are on FMLA or light duty or things of that nature that are going to be going over there. And we're going to continue to build this because we are trying to run it so lean and so efficient. But we also think we can run it better in this way, that it's going to be an enhancement more than a problem. But it is going to require some additional training. And Katie's amazing with what she's done with some of her strategic planning, and it fits right into her strategic plan and what she's wanting to do in the future with some of the at-home call taking and then the 911 tactical operators and their training. And we look to be cutting edge. The only other place that's doing this is Castle Rock within their center, and we're actually going to go down there and visit Castle Rock at the end of this month. And we feel it's a much more efficient way to do it. And so this is the direction we're going. And we want to, I think we're going to be cutting edge in in building our training platform. It may require a mini academy at some point once we build it out, but we're going to be on the job training until it's built.
Well, that I think mostly when I hear a lot of technology coming out, what I get concerned about is the funding, because I know that these things they can build, and then they lower the prices, but the technology advances, and so then there's it can go down a rabbit hole of being extremely expensive. And so it kind of gives me a little bit of pause. If it seems to me like we're a small enough community that it makes sense to share that expense. And so when you talk about, skilled personnel and 911 calls and how we share the expense of this, I just know that it can get really, really expensive for a municipality as small as ours and a budget as small as ours. So it gives me a little bit of pause, but I think it's very exciting technology. And then, the surveillance part and the tracking part, I think that gives everybody tremendous pause. And I feel like perhaps we could spend a whole nother time talking just about that differentiation, because that's really where we hear from the community is the issues of excessive surveillance from some of these technologies.
Yes, Counselor, I appreciate that. And that's why I avoid those two words, surveillance and tracking, because these are not doing that. And that's a great comment about the funding, because I ran a helicopter program for years, and even a free helicopter is very expensive. And this is basically a helicopter program in a small city that has big city problems for the price of the pilot. And we're at the day and age where we can actually do that and have that advancement. And I think it'll just be a benefit to every citizen here. And it needs to be run correctly because, like I said, trust is due, rent's due every day on trust, right? So.
Just one last question, Chief. HB 26-1037, which bans governmental purchase of personal data from third parties. It's in the House right now, and it's got pretty heavy opposition by law enforcement. At some point, we can answer this offline too. Could you just send us where we kind of stand on that one?
Well, yeah, they knew they didn't have the votes on it, and they pushed it forward for more consideration. Where on Senate Bill 70, they did have the votes, and yeah, and hopefully my faith is placed well that that's not going to continue to law. But House Bill 1037, the problem with it is, and the stance the chiefs and the sheriffs actually had opposition from almost everybody, the city managers, just government in general. There was a lot of opposition, and the main issue is any third party data. Everybody thinks that it's just Flock or it's just our body cameras. It's everything. And that's why we have contracts in place to govern that and internal policies and procedures to govern that. And it would take us back 20 years to handwriting reports if we didn't have third parties. And so you just have to hold those third parties accountable to the contracts. And so I think that's why it's getting so much opposition, because it's not reality.
Okay. And we're joining in opposition then.
I have as a member of the Chiefs Association.
Okay. And I get, sometimes you're talking for the Chiefs Association, sometimes you're talking.
Yeah, and I know Peggy's involved too, as far as the city, and it does fit our strategic planning goals for legislation within the city and public safety.
Okay. Great,
well.
thank you. Thanks for the
sir.
presentation.
Well, yes, thank you so much for teaching us about this, because I think it's a real value to the community working together and having these drones there, because when they had the Twin Buttes fire last year and I wasn't here, and then I was going, but if we would have had the drones, I would have known it was way on the other side. So that's a value. So thank you. I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is grant approval update with Tommy Crosby.
Can I just ask, Chief, we didn't get the presentation that you had in our agenda packet. Could you just send a soft copy to us just so we have what you presented on? Cool, thanks.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tommy Crosby, Economic Opportunity Manager with the Prosperity Office. Here today to give a quick rundown of 3 grants that you're going to see on tonight's regular meeting consent agenda. I want to start off with a quick congratulations to Council in 2025 for awarding over $640,000 worth of grants. Y'all awarded 105 projects across 5 grant programs. I think it's really important to remind the community that each of these grants is a public-private partnership in its own way. It's a direct investment into the organizations that sometimes provide a little bit more color to our community if you're looking at arts and culture, or some of the projects that businesses might be putting off, whether that's a facade improvement or replacing a cracked sidewalk through some of our Renew grant funds. But a big congratulations to Council for a fantastic investment in these 105 projects across 2025. We'll have a bit of a annual report in the coming months to be able to present a more in-depth overview of these 105 projects. As a quick reminder, the grant approval process. So we have a staff review. We do a quick eligibility overview of all of these grant applications to make sure they're in line with each specific grant program guidelines and best practices. We then send those to a committee review of subject matter experts. The only grant that does not follow this is the Renew grant. We try to make that one a little bit more administrative. That goes through a planning and engineering review. It does not go through that committee review. Council has the final vote on kind of being that subject matter expert for the Renew grant. We include the supporting documents for these grant programs in the regular meeting packet. We try to allow this study session primer as a way to ask questions about specific grants that you might have, so we can roll through the formal approval via consent agenda during tonight's meeting. So at tonight's regular meeting, you will see 3 grant programs with multiple grants under each program: the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant, the Lodgers Tax Local Event Marketing Grant, and then the Renew Grant. This slide focuses on a quick summary of what you're going to see on tonight's agenda. I'll start with the Renew grant on the right side. 3 projects are being recommended for funding. As a reminder, the Renew grant is a dollar-for-dollar matching grant up to $5,000. We try to use this as a way to encourage businesses to invest in place, facade improvements, any sort of public improvement that's visible from the public right of way, any sort of property improvement that's visible from the public right of way are eligible for Renew grant funds. The local Lodgers Tax Local Event Marketing Grant, we have 22 projects up for funding recommendation this evening, just over $65,000 worth of funding. And then lastly, I'm going to quickly touch on the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant. We have 16 projects up for recommendation on the regular meeting agenda tonight. The amount being requested is just over $151,000. Now, I want to take a moment to make a quick note on the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Grant. This was the second most competitive round we've ever seen in the now 5 years of this grant program. We had over $1 million worth of funding being requested, over 48 applications. Our reviewers were tasked with a very difficult job of whittling that down to take a very large square peg and shove that through quite a small round hole. It's inevitable. You're probably going to receive some outreach from applicants that are a little upset that they did not receive funding. But the one thing that I'm really trying to stress to folks is it's very rare that we receive this much competition in a single grant round. When you have $1 million worth of funding requests and only about $150,000 to distribute, there are going to be quite a few no's along the way. So I wanted to just keep it short and sweet. I'm happy to answer any questions that counselors might have regarding any specific grant programs or projects that are on tonight's regular meeting agenda.
Tommy, thanks for the presentation. And just a clarification, you and the committees do all the work. We're just approving stuff. So if there's credit out there, it's the sweat's put in by you and your groups, and we appreciate that for sure. On the lodgers tax, arts and culture funding, you've explained this to me before, and I apologize, I need a reminder, but there's 3 groups that are double dipping or they're getting multiple grants through a couple of different venues. What allows a group to come back and get multiple grants?
Sure. So the lodgers tax arts and culture grant is set up intentionally to complement the lodgers tax local event marketing grant.
Okay.
In the lodgers tax policy, so you have the ballot language that stepped down into the lodgers tax policy, where council provided in 2021 some clarity in how those funds can be used. And then that steps down into our grant programs. In that lodgers tax policy, it explicitly says that local event marketing could be used to support potentially grant funded projects through the arts and culture grant funded program. So we did a coordinated dance as these 2 grant programs went through review at the same time. Our arts and culture review was a couple days ahead of the event marketing review. So we tried to tag team with them of providing them an updated list in real time of what projects were likely on that path towards being recommended for funding. So you will see the quote unquote double dips for arts and culture and event marketing, very much so intentionally.
Okay. Great. Thank you for the explanation. And I apologize that you have to explain that a couple times for me. On the Renew grant funding, 11th Street's already doing the work on their front portion. Is it often that businesses move forward and then are just hoping that they get the grant?
Good question. So we had a long conversation with 11th Street about this. We specifically let grant applicants know that they cannot move forward with a project until the grant has been approved. So with their project, they said, well, we have to move forward with parts of it. Can we apply for specific components of our project that won't be completed until after the March 3rd council meeting? So the components of their grant fund that would be eligible for Renew grant reimbursement are the components of the project that have not yet been completed.
Okay. So if we table them, we'll hear the scream from 11th Street?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And lastly, I just want to throw in a protest. The vape signage above, and I've talked to Tommy about this, but the vape signage that we're helping remove from above Brim and Boot, that totally seems like a builder owner responsibility to me. I would not stop this on any realm for this or for any reason, but it does seem like the building owner is responsible to remove signage from a previous business and it doesn't turn into a grant, but I would not block it because of that reason. So thank you very much. Appreciate the work.
Thank you.
So just so I understand, so when we use the lodgers tax, for example, to do public art at Chapman, is it prescribed? Do you say we're going to do a sculpture or we're going to do a mural, or is that through the committee, or is it a dollar amount assigned and then whatever public art is decided by the committee?
Good question. So specifically for Chapman, the funding for the repurpose of the old 10th Mountain Division tow rope, that's actually coming from the Parks and Rec budget. That's not coming from the lodgers tax arts and culture budget. What we're trying to start coordinating with the Durango Creative District is targeted calls for artists using lodgers tax arts and culture funding. So let's just hypothetically say we know that the transportation department has a wall on their building at the city's transportation center that they'd love to see a mural on. One area that we're trying to activate potentially through round 2 of the arts and culture program in 26 is a coordinated call for artists that's using lodgers tax arts and culture funding from that second round with an identified location already set. So we would kind of have the call to artists be facilitated through the grant program itself. So it's a new concept that we haven't tried yet, but with the recently updated public art master plan, we're now able to get a little bit more intentional about where and how we're placing art. And so we're going to try, hopefully, whether that's round 2 in 2026 or maybe round 1, 27, those calls to artists that are kind of facilitated via our existing grant program. Does that answer your question?
You know, I guess I would like to see more investment in public art. I just think it makes our community so much more vibrant and interesting. I would also like to see more diverse product, whether it's sculptures or lighting or murals or, you know, different, you know, I feel like there was some nature art pieces that were done. And, you know, I was in another city that had a pretty generous public art budget. And so, you know, but what I can't recall was that I feel like there was a committee that decided what to do with the money. Like the money was designated based on a particular project. So for example, if we were going to do an investment in the convention center, then the committee would decide if it was a sculpture or if it was a mural. But the funding was already dedicated. So there was $1 million, for example, for public art. But the committee decided what they did, whether it was, something that was like a mural that was natural, or, that had landscaping or something like that. That's what I'm just trying to understand. Like, first of all, if we want to see a greater investment in public art, how might we do that? And then if so, does it have to be a mural or a sculpture? What options are there and who decides?
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to coordinate directly with the Durango Creative District and some of those kind of next steps or phases of the public art master plan. As the public art master plan naturally expands outside of just traditional murals and sculptures, but how can we get more intentional with the public art investments that we're making as a community? Not to schlep more work on the Creative District, but I think that's a great opportunity for the subject matter experts to kind of engage arts and culture stakeholders to really come up with whether that's a 1, 3, 5 year plan for how to make those investments a little bit more intentional rather than a shotgun approach through a grant program, which is great. But if we can get a little bit more pointed of where and how we're incorporating public art, I think that's a great step.
And what about, do we borrow public art from other cities or institutions or universities or anything like that?
Recently, we haven't. The city used to have an art on loan program that's been backburnered for about 5 years. But as of late, that hasn't been something that we've done.
Can the police drone go in and grab something from another municipality?
Well, we have
get some extra usage out of this thing?
That the drone event in Snowdown, which was, I thought it was a blast. So I think that's not related to this, but I don't know. I think about drones and art. But I'm grateful for all of the work. I know that it is a very sort of arduous process to try to do so much with little funding. So I would like to see how we continue to invest more in public art. So we'll hopefully have that conversation. And just, thank you for all your work in that of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. All righty, so I just want to understand the concept of good standing with the city to receive funding. Do you have a definition of that?
Not explicitly. We tend to work with the city attorney's office and the city manager's office when there are instances where that might come into question. In the application for a lot of these grants, we ask, does a business have a valid business license with the city of Durango? We kind of use that as a preliminary catch-all for if there's issues that have required a business license to be revoked, it's likely that a business is not in good standing. We tend to approach it on a case-by-case basis in direct consultation with the city manager's office and the city attorney's office.
Okay, so that's not in reference to their behavior then? The organization's behavior? Okay.
Okay, I was just like, Mayor, normally it's not so much behavior, it's mostly based on business license, behind on sales tax, lawsuit maybe with the city. Those are the things that I think historically we've seen as good standing, but that's kind of just what we've seen over here in the past couple of years.
All righty, because I'm just curious because, this past year being there, and since we had the immigration hearing here and we had an individual from Companeros who's going to be allocated $10,000 yelling F you to our congressperson's representative here. Every meeting I go to on a regional level, I'm always apologizing for that. That's saying that it's not the city who said that. It was a participant in the public hearing. Now, to me, that isn't good standing, nor does it seem like we should award that group $10,000. So where would we go from here?
I think it's up to the discretion of council. As staff, we work with our subject matter expert committees to bring to you all what we think is a representative sample of whether that's arts and culture or event marketing, to then place the final decision in the hands of council. But through conversations with city manager and city attorney, that specific applicant has not risen to the top as a topic of conversation.
Yes, Mayor and Council, and just Mark, maybe with a little bit of assistance here, but normally from an administrative side, as we go through a grant, it's kind of more of a checklist of either yes or no's. Stances by organization, voices that have been made, those would typically fall in line with the policy direction of the council in regards to whether they believe that that organization may fit in line with the council, but that's why the council has the final approval. We usually look at it at administrative area, a way that we can review the applications. Trying to think of the word, and it's going equally and fairly. Would that be accurate, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the award of grants, there's no right to a grant. So you're allowed to be somewhat subjective in why you get them out. What you can't do is you can't be unequal or discriminatory in the award of a grant. Litigation is a good standard. We're not in any litigation with the one group that you mentioned. There was another group that's getting a grant that had some litigation, but I would tell you that resolved in such a way that I would not consider them not in good standing, because once we got in front of a judge, that was resolved very easily, and that could have gone the other way. I mean, that particular group could have decided to continue the lawsuit and extended things. And at that point, I would advise you, if you asked me, is someone in good standing with us if they have an active lawsuit against us? And I would say, that's certainly something you could say that changes their standing with the city. So I hope that answers your question, but good standing is it's an important element because it's hard to explain to the public why you're giving someone money who might be suing you or costing you money. Procedure-wise, if that's an issue you want to debate, you would call it off the consent agenda and discuss it at the meeting when the grants are actually being approved.
But as the final approval, the council has the ability to approve or disapprove any recommendation that staff makes on these grant awards.
You could pull that one out.
Absolutely, that would be at the will of the council.
Correct. But the city manager staff is great about contacting me with questions like this, so we can kind of help them get resolved on the front end. So it's an easier decision for you guys.
All righty, that's a great explanation because, as mayor, I go to some of these regional things and it comes up all the time. I say, well, that was not the city. We didn't yell F you to our congressperson. But that does come up. And to me personally, that's not in good standing.
I mean, I can tell you that I heard as recently as yesterday that the individual with that organization is threatening to sue if he's not placed on the task force. Hadn't done it yet. That's anecdotal at this point, but certainly, I think that your point with that individual is warranted to be fully discussed in public before a grant is awarded.
All righty. Anyways, thank you, Tommy. I think the work that you do is excellent, you know, awarding all these grants because we are a very small community and any extra money we can give to our groups and our artists, it all makes the area of Durango much more desirable. So thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you. And
Mhm.
again, I'll just remind you, tomorrow when you receive inevitably some upset applicants who didn't receive funding, the Arts and Culture Fund had $1 million worth of asks for 150,000 worth of funding to distribute.
The next item on the agenda is trash and recycle overfill fees.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. John Harris, Public Works Director. You requested that this item come back to you, so this is for discussion. Hopefully we generate some good discussion tonight. We're going from exciting police technology and grants to trash and recycling fees.
You got bears.
We get bears as well. The fee itself supports the organizational stewardship goal and the strategic plan, as well as the water sector element and the sustainability plan, in that the fee recovers costs to provide a service. That's the strategic plan element. And as far as sustainability, overfilled trash cans, the fee discourages that. Debris falls to the ground, conveys to the river, and degrades water quality. You've seen this slide before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to give you some more context. We collect trash from about 11,000 locations within the city every week. That's 5 days a week. We have route 4 trash and 4 curbside recycling routes. We collect about 10,000 tons of trash a year, and we have 13 employees that handle all that. There's also a Saturday commercial collection route that happens every week. The reason I want to get through that quickly is just to show you how little time our collection drivers have at each location. So using those numbers again, where each of our drivers is stopping about 300 times every day. Within an 8-hour workday, they have less than 2 minutes, and that doesn't count the 1 or 2 times that they have to go empty the truck, which could take a half an hour to 45 minutes. So they don't have a lot of time to spend at each of these locations throughout the day. You all know that the solid waste utility is an enterprise fund. It's funded exclusively from rates that are generated unless we happen to get a grant, which is pretty rare anymore. Enterprise fund rates are typically established by developing a cost of service analysis, or otherwise known as a nexus study. The last study that we did for the solid waste fund was in 2021. And the 2 graphics on the right of the screen there, the top part is a residential rate comparison that was a part of this report in 2021. The bottom is a commercial rate comparison. In the top graph, the blue dots are 60-gallon residential containers. The orange dots are 90 gallons. Most of our containers are 60 gallons. But you can see in 2021, we were fairly competitive, on both sizes of containers relative to our comps. On the commercial side, we were a little bit low, but not the lowest. Our rates generate about roughly $3.5 million a year in revenue. After the last cost of service study, you all elected to increase rates a small amount, 2.5%. So a typical residential customer saw an increase of about 43 cents a month on their bill. The 2021 study did not consider the fee that we're talking about tonight. It could be incorporated into a new study. We plan on doing a new cost of service study next year. This might look familiar. This is a screenshot out of the recent master fee schedule that you all considered. A couple things I wanted to point out. The fee up till last year was $12.50. The new fee in the new master fee schedule is $12.81. One thing to note, though, that it's only in the residential section. So there is no overfilled container fee for a commercial account. Why is the fee important? Well, I talked to you about efficiency. You know, our team doesn't have long to spend at each stop. more important to me is the safety of our employees. We have an automated collection system right now, but when trash is falling out of a can, or if it falls out of a container as we're lifting that container to the truck, an employee has to get out of the truck, maybe on a busy street, manually collect that trash. That's just not a safe operation. And then, of course, that overfilled container, those containers attract wildlife, which I think is what we're going to talk about today. Wanted to stress again, this only applies to residential customers. And the definition for us for an overfilled container is when the lid will not close all the way. Related to wildlife conflicts, in 2018, there was an ordinance that was adopted that established a framework for requirements and fees that are applied in the cases when customers allow their containers to be overfilled. This is a link to a city website page that has all of the fees and the fines that are related. Primarily, we're not driving around looking for these things. We usually get identified cans that are overfilled or identified either by our collection drivers or attentive citizens that are just calling us and letting us know about that. I wanted to give you, I'm always hesitant to give out this information because the cost of service study is the cost that each entity needs to charge to their customers to provide a service. So the cost for us to provide a service is not necessarily the same as Cortez or Ridgeway. But to give you some context, I've given you the residential and commercial rates that we charge here in Durango, as well as looks like 6 other communities. The overfilled fees, again, we don't charge a commercial fee, and then what percentage of the rate our fee is. So for us, we're on the low end of the rates, I would say, and kind of on the lower end of the percentage that the rate is, that the fee is of the rate. A lot of information really quickly. I know you want to talk about that some more, but I also want to let you know I had a conversation with our utility billing staff, and this is in the staff report as well. Last year, we assessed a fee, I think it was about 750 times. That generated about $10,000 in revenue, overfilled fees, right? It was about, I think it was 760 assessments. In some cases, a customer was assessed for more than one fee. So they may have had 2 cans, both that were overfilled, generated about $10,000 in revenue. I asked our billing staff how often we get calls back from angry customers, and it's almost never. When I talked to our staff yesterday, we were producing the bills for February, and the person I spoke to thought there were going to be 40 or 50 assessments, and she anticipated we might get maybe 1 call, and it might be a customer it's either angry about the fee or just didn't understand what the fee is. So we're not getting a lot of feedback from customers when we assess these fees. That's short and sweet, but I think that's the information you needed to start your discussion. We'll put you on the list.
Yeah. Can I go ahead, Mayor? So John, I've got a couple of different ways that I want to approach this topic. So I'll take a few questions, and I'll give you a few questions, and then I might take some turns here. So no overfill fee for commercial accounts seems to be problematic to me. Is there a thinking within your department that we should at least add a fee in for commercial accounts that are overfilled?
Honestly, when we discussed it as a staff, the Public Works staff was not aware that there wasn't a commercial and residential fee. The way we've handled it in the past is we will just let the customer know that they're overfilling their container and either have them call for multiple collections during the week or perhaps a larger bin.
And if I remember right, the residential collections, and this is from memory, but the calling in for the extra trash dump was another $12.81 fee.
It's the exact same fee.
There's no disincentives here for somebody just to overfill, except they've got to make an extra phone call and have you guys come back out, right? Okay.
Sounds correct.
Okay. The overfilled definition, the lid won't close all the way, but the driver has discretion on whether to determine if that's really a problem or not,
Absolutely.
right? Somebody's broom sticking out of there is not.
We're not trying to be the trash police.
That's what I
So,
was thinking.
you know, if the lid is reasonably closed, my expectation as the director would be that we just collect the trash that day and not charge the fee.
Okay, great. The overfill violations that you said, 760 assessments, did you get any indication of how many times it's a repeat customer that they are doing it consistently over and over and over?
Didn't, but I have the data. It was a large spreadsheet that Utility Billy gave me, and I could provide that data in an email if you'd like that.
It'd be interesting just to see how frequent. I would assume that that's a somewhat of an indicator of folks who could care less about $12.81. They're just going to keep.
That's a fair point.
Okay. All right. That's great. I would love to talk about bears and how this connects back to bears, but that's going to be a little bit of a longer conversation. Can I cede my time and then I'll come back? Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, if I could, John, we don't collect all the commercial trash in the city, correct?
That's an excellent point.
So if we were to charge an overfill fee, that doesn't mean that everyone on the commercial side would be getting charged by that if they have a different provider, correct?
That's correct.
Can I ask a follow-up question right there? Can we do anything to tell Republic that they can't be doing over? I mean, isn't it a violation in some way, shape, or form that Republic's allowing commercial containers to be overfilled? And I'm just using Republic as an example.
I couldn't answer that for you right now.
Okay.
Not code enforcement or on public works. I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. So having worked in another city, the number one complaint was regarding solid waste. Missed pickups, leaving trash, too early of a start. 4 o'clock in the morning, the trucks are coming through and you haven't had a chance to put out your can. So do you have that information?
Not tonight, I don't. I've heard some of the.
Somebody does. What is the number one complaint from constituents? It's
I'm
not
sorry?
from solid waste?
I didn't hear the question.
The number one complaint from constituents. I wondered if somebody, and I thought maybe somebody from the city staff might know, because it was overwhelmingly the number one complaint in my previous life. Do we have a?
Joey might.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. So yeah, the number one complaint we usually get from customers is illegal dumping. That's a big one. Residents from one address using somebody else's dumpster. Same thing with the commercial side of it as well. So that's mostly the number one complaint we get throughout the city.
With everything, right?
With everything.
With
I mean,
everything.
As far as start times go, concerns about trucks coming through neighborhoods too early. Our commercial routes do not start till 6 o'clock a.m. Our residential trucks are not in residential areas until 8 o'clock a.m. So we kind of control that span as far as how trucks are in certain areas of the city.
Thank you. And I say that because, again, like it was overwhelmingly the number one complaint. And it was also pretty easy to resolve for the most part. I mean, it's not a huge infrastructure project where, it's going to cost millions of dollars. Usually it was something that could be resolved internally. But I guess the question I have is, we know that we've sort of been behind as a community in raising our rates, which we know is hugely unpopular. When's the last time these rates were raised?
2022.
Okay,
And
so not
the
so long.
typical residential customer, it was a 43-cent increase per month. Pretty low increase.
Okay, so that's good to hear. But you mentioned in the beginning of the presentation regarding it being a enterprise fund. Is it covering our cost?
It's not recovering all of our costs now, and there are some costs. We're contracted with Republic to operate the transfer station and haul our trash, and we market our recyclable materials. They have, by contract, they're allowed to pass through some costs, some fees that weren't anticipated when the contract was drafted, and the city has not traditionally passed on all of those costs to our customers. We also, there's a lot going on here. We need to do another rate study. That'll happen next year. We're also coming up on a contract negotiation with Republic. So a lot of unknowns at this point.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I guess just to clarify, you're not over solid waste? Is there another director over solid waste?
I'm over solid waste.
You are over solid waste. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
First off, I'd love to point out about 6 months, 7 months ago, I went on a ride along and got to watch commercial trash, and they're trying to do 100 cans in an hour. And it was incredible how fast they were moving and how good they are with that joystick, especially. So I do want to move the conversation towards a focus on bears at this point. And if everybody will bear with me, I've got about a minute of. So what? Oh, thanks. Thanks for picking that up, Luke. So any adjustment of trash fees should focus on ways that improves the ability for trash and recycling employees to do their work, improves trash pickup services for residents, and helps solve our increasing issues around bear and human conflicts. Last year, there were 290 bear and trash reports through code enforcement, highlighting an urgent need for improved bear conflict prevention efforts. We had the lockdown at the high school last year due to a bear on site, and that bear was eventually euthanized. Now we have a notably warm winter this year, seeing bears emerging far earlier than usual. And we saw clear signs when we did a tour of the Apache Mobile Home Park near Needham Elementary this past Friday. Paw prints on the cans. Bears are emerging much earlier at this point. Bear Smarts provided valuable education on bear conflict prevention for decades. This year, I believe, presents an opportunity to enhance our combined strategies significantly. I'm hoping to discuss with Council a collaboration between trash and recycling staff, code enforcement, and Bear Smart with the goal of improved maintenance of bear-resistant trash cans, better resident education, and higher fees for overfilled cans to act as a disincentive to help minimize human-bear interactions. Key to this is spreading the work among staff and residents. I believe assigning a part-time focus, part of the year focus on bear-related education and enforcement to one of the new ranger officers would be critical. By collaborating with rangers and the trash and recycling team, we can better educate homeowners on proper trash management and decrease the number of times trash is the cause of the death of a bear or a bear becomes a potential threat to residents. Saturday, I worked with Bear Smart and the DHS Green Team to do an informal survey of bear-proof cans for residences between 12th Street and College Avenue, east of 3rd Avenue. So we're in the old neighborhood here. We counted 185 cans in this section of the city, and 19% of the bear-proof trash cans in that area were not functioning properly. So that's almost 1 in 5 cans that weren't preventing bears from accessing the trash. That's granted a rough little project, but it's still illustrative of the problem. Many of these issues stem from inadequately maintained cans that simply need relatively minor repairs, mainly a quick lock mechanism swap that actually took seconds, and we learned that on Friday. So the maintenance is relatively minimum, and I believe the maintenance could be spread out over multiple years. When we're talking about maintaining 6,000 cans, I think I'm in the ballpark here. We were not talking about doing all of those cans in a given year. I think the cans that we saw that were having problems were 6 and 7 years old. We actually had numbers, and Kodiak had given me a cheat sheet of when we had purchased those cans. And so there's a maintenance issue here, and I believe the community can significantly improve bear prevention, problem prevention with a coordinated effort among departments and a designated focus part-time and for part of the year from our rangers to assist with this essential task. By working collaboratively, we can protect both our residents and the local bear population more effectively using rangers, trash, and recycling staff to provide education and identification, and then routine maintenance of cans and citations when needed. So I guess I wanted to throw that out and just get a feel for you. It does feel to me like we're a little more siloed than we need to be because we've got this bear problem that's across both trash and recycling pickups as well as PD. I'll give you a moment to respond, and thanks for bearing with me.
Sure, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, we replace about anywhere from 175 to 250 residential cans a year. The only cans that we purchase anymore are bear-proof containers, right? It only makes sense. So just naturally, we'll be replacing containers that are not bear-proof with containers that are bear-proof. Second, we anticipate on a different solid waste related project, a pretty significant cost savings this year. Joey and I were just talking about that earlier today. If that cost savings is actually realized, you'll probably hear me come back to this council and recommend that we purchase, make a bulk purchase of 300-gallon bear-proof trash containers, which would not have happened for several more years. So we're working on that as well. Hopefully that comes to fruition later this year. The real issue, it's in the data that we showed earlier, it's the staff time that it would take to put a program like that together. We do maintain a collection of parts. When we get calls to go out and repair things, we obviously do that. We find more often though that damage to cans are from, not from wildlife, but from people that have pried off the locking mechanism and that sort of thing. So we would have to talk about the staffing that's required to establish a program where we went throughout the city weekly or daily in repairing trash cans.
Is it fair to say when you did find vandalism, nobody's walking down an alley and vandalizing trash cans randomly, right? It's the homeowner who does not want to have a locking can because it's a hassle for them. So we could be issuing citations for folks who have repeatedly messed with the locking mechanisms. Everything I saw on the Kodiak can was a very quick replacement of lock mechanisms. And even if that's done by code enforcement staff, right? Your team you can foresee a process where your team is identifying it, but code enforcement is taking care of the problem. Especially what I saw was the vast majority of these are people messing with the lock mechanism.
Sure, I think there's potential for that interdepartmental collaboration.
One more question. In my calculation, when I'm looking at 6,000 cans, et cetera, if you take the math between the number of weeks, five days a week, I think we're running 5 days a week. We're somewhere around 23 cans a day. If you maintenance all 6,000 of those, it could be discussed that if you've got a rotation where you're only getting to those cans once every 3 years or something, that we're down into a manageable level. I feel like that load is not requiring a lot more staffing. Just something to throw out there. The rough number seems to me to be able to get down to something that's manageable. So
If I could get really quick on that one, because we're really getting into the administration side of what staff does on a day-to-day basis. And I think from a council perspective, it's setting the goal of what it is that the council is wanting to see. If it is, we would like to see all of our cans maintained at a percentage rate of this, we can absolutely do a staff presentation to talk about what would be needed to do so. It's more complicated than saying this is how many cans we have this amount of staff, and we can do that, because there's a lot of other duties that go on. So I want to make sure from an approach that we're looking at it holistically, that we just using data numbers here and there doesn't actually go in and quantitate exactly what it is that all of their duties are and the things that they have to do. So if we can move more towards, from a council perspective, what is that goal that you would like to achieve? The administration can then, we can as a department and city management lead out a plan to say this is what it would take to get to what that goal is.
Yeah, the only piece I would push back a little bit on is that we have a viable nonprofits that have a lot of knowledge and understanding of what the problems are here. I think, just some boots on the ground, basic work by myself and some other folks too. It's just to get past this inclination to think that the problem's much bigger than what it is. And so I think that was part of what I was intended on the discussion. I certainly have taken up more than my fair share of time, and I'll stop at this point, but point taken. Is there any kind of conversation that we want to have just as council, thoughts and those kind of things as well?
Yes, because I do think, since we did some of the other ordinances with the bear deterrence mechanisms, and the trash also, I think, is also the customer has to police their trash. We've given out guidelines that they should put their trash out the night before and so forth. So there has to be some customer input, but I do think that if we think about this the correct way that our city manager suggested, we could set up some kind of replacement mechanism long-term. So we could probably put that on our discussion items going forward. So yes, I do think so. Did you have any?
Well, so I guess what comes to mind is that when Joey? Right.
Isn't John and then Joey?
Yeah.
Joey. So, Joey had mentioned like the number of complaints related to trash, which is again, like as we go through our budget cycle, perhaps is there an opportunity to invest more in solid waste, which would mean an increase in fees? I think that's really what comes to mind. Like if we want to see a greater investment in this department, it means we got to figure out how we get them more money, which is going to be through increasing fees, which we could then discuss as a council how we wanted to do that. And then they can determine, my sense is based on feedback from the constituents, how we want to invest those funds. Because it is, you know, I just know it's a huge operation. It's probably one of the largest areas of public works, like in terms of personnel. Is that
No,
fair?
it's a good chunk of public works. It's about 25% of the department.
Of a department is in solid waste. So, you know, and then that would likely mean increasing personnel. And then does that personnel go towards, you know, what area of the, you know, however we want to look at that. So, I mean, I think we should consider this, especially if we're way behind in terms of it covering our costs. And perhaps there's some technology that we're not, you know, going door to door, that's a lot of work, a lot. I wonder if there's not some, I don't know that there is or not, but perhaps there's some technology available where we could take advantage of it. I don't know what that looks like, but it's just a thought. Because, you know, I just know that solid waste, I mean, it's the number one constituent concern, more than public safety, right? More than almost any other, more than infrastructure, more than parks, more than, it's like the number one customer complaint, I think. And so perhaps we look at that as we're going through our budget next time.
Is there
Yep.
value,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
is there value in discussing as a council further a maintenance program for the existing camp, a part-time, part-year enforcement related to bears that would be a designation for the ranger? To keep it. I'm interested in seeing.
Okay.
Council's guidance.
I'm interested.
I mean, I would imagine that is going to require a fund increase. And so perhaps we could get that presentation because that's what gives me a little pause. I mean, I like the idea, but is that going to require an increase in our fund, in our rates to constituents? So can we do it internally with what we have? I don't know.
Internally and what we have, the answer is always, as I say, is like our plate for our staff members is always full. Now, we can always maneuver and take things off of said plate to make room for other things. But when we redirect staff resources from what they're currently doing, it will mean that there may be not as an importance or projection on other things, right? And so that's kind of where it comes to the council, as we can provide a staffing plan of like, if we wanted to look at maybe using more of the rangers' time that are coming in for this, what that means in regards to enforcement and what things may get less attention. And then the council can make that decision regarding whether that is worth the trade-off, right? And so that's where we kind of need that guidance if we're going through this, what the council is looking to accomplish so that we can set up a staffing plan with what resources we have now and what that would mean for maybe some other things that may get left behind so that we could make room for something additional.
Mhm. Yep. You got any thoughts?
Well, I'd love to ask staff, I can bring this up in new business, you know, for the meeting. I guess I want to ask council, we're missing two councilors here. Does council feel like we need to do anything to bring them up to speed, or that's just the way the government works?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
I know, sorry about that.
You know what? If they have thoughts, I'm sure they're going to let us know.
And
But
they could
I do
share them
think
at the time.
we should build off of what was accomplished with the Bear Mats and Bear Smart, and the fact that that was the major complaint this year, because we are going into a drought cycle and the bears are coming out of the mountains to eat in town. So we should address it because it's going to be the same issue next year.
Right. Okay. No, I think that's, anything else that you wanted to add while we're having this broad discussion? Okay.
Not for me.
Really appreciate the out of the box.
All righty, thank you. So you're going to send something to put it on a proposed agenda item?
So if council's okay, I plan
Yeah.
on talking about increasing the overfill fee, I plan
Mhm.
on talking about maintenance program and seeing what that looks like for the city staff. And then
The Bears.
Something with bears,
Right. Okay, so
whatever the third thing was.
he can just,
Sorry.
you can just send it off to Jose.
Yeah.
Do you have anything for? All right, I think that's the end of our discussion here unless there's something else. Nope, so we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.